So, custom fitting for clubs. How do we do it and why do we do it this way? It's really important to dynamically actually test what it is you're going to end up with. Otherwise you don't know for certain whether it's right or not. So I'm going to take you through how we do it, why we do it, and why it's important to do it this way. So the first thing we do is get you to bring your existing clubs in. It's really important to reference how they're set up, so to run through all the specs, lengths, loft, lie, components, head and shaft and grip components, to understand their setup. And what we've got here on screen, this is from Tom Rosenthal's fitting that we did previously, and we recorded previously, to highlight the variations within the bag. By understanding this, we can start to get a picture, even without someone hitting, of why their game is set up a certain way. So if we're looking at Tom's bag here, the irons are quite an interesting setup in that, you know, the 5-iron shaft is different to the 6, 8, 9 and approach wedge, the pitch wedge shaft is different to the others. So this is quite an extreme spec. But when someone says, my iron play is really inconsistent, if we didn't know this, then we wouldn't start to get a picture of why that's the case. Now, by looking at this spec, we can see different shaft weights, we can see different balances, we can see different length specs. So we can actually build up a picture of why certain clubs perform a certain way. So ultimately, the spec of the clubs determines, you know, in its sort of raw state, how this club is going to promote movement. So if the club's heavy or if it's light, it helps the player move a certain way or it hinders movement a certain way. So we can start to understand the flow of the clubs and actually sometimes tell someone which clubs they hit which way before they even hit. This is really key because it gives us a benchmark, a start point that we know, right, this is the baseline. If we're going to provide someone with value, we've got to improve upon this, but it gives us that start point to then build out the fit from there. So we're going to move into the bay from this point and just discuss a little bit about what goes on from there. So no matter which bit of the bag we're doing, whether it's just driver, just irons or the full bag, we'd start off by, you know, if it's full bag irons, but whichever part of the bag we're fitting, we'd start off by looking at how someone's existing clubs perform. So get them to hit some shots, get a little bit of base data. So this is a case of looking at club speeds, ball speed consistency, the smash factor, that's the ratio of ball speed to club speed. So that shows us how efficiently you're transferring energy through from swing to ball. And then things like the launch and the spin, the flight characteristics. Again, this backs up and validates the base performance of someone's existing set. So it gives us that start line to improve upon. So using Launch Montwise, the TrackMan measures all of these parameters. We can start to gather and build up a picture through getting an average. Generally speaking, once someone's had a good warm-up, getting kind of 5 or 6 solid shots worth of data, we can start to see trends and patterns from that point. So we'd look at where the launch and the spin is, we'd look at where the shot shapes and patterns are. But most importantly, we can then look at someone's swing, how they move, but attribute the performance to how the club's set up as well. Once we have that, we can then start to see the characteristics, be it, you know, a spin rate, be it a ball speed profile, be it a flight pattern, launch angles, shot shapes. We can start to see, right, which bits do we want to affect in a positive way? Which bits, based on how the clubs are set up, we can attribute to that, and then how do we then use the club to augment performance from there? So, you know, this one is a little lighter than what I actually play, but balance-wise is higher up the club. It's a sort of a mid to upper balance point. So that makes it easy, in principle, to get the tone of the club through. So you can see there the shot's gone to the left. So I know as a fitter that I can look at that shot pattern. If we see that as a trend through the set, or through the set of shots, I can look at that pattern and trend and go, right, I have some tools at my discretion, at my hand on the back wall there with all the different options we've got to change the setup of the club to positively affect that performance. So, you know, club path 0.5, very square, but the face is really shut. So we can use the weight and the balance of the club to influence how the club swings. Now, there are plenty of people that don't think that trial and error, you know, really A/B testing is a way to fit because it's a little bit scattergun approach. The answer to that is absolutely not. Is that until someone's actually tested someone, you've tested the limits, you know, too light, too heavy, for example, that you know where the sweet spot is. Without actually trialing these things and you know, players get into habits and patterns with something that they've already got. So they get into a comfort area really, and until you push that and see what is too much, what is too little. So for example, if this is on the light side for me, we need to find out where we go too heavy to know, right, that's the upper limit, and then are we challenging that upper limit, for example a junior getting bigger and stronger, or are we going safe from that. For example, in a few years' time I'll need something which is easier to use and I don't have to work hard, to know where to pitch it within that window that we can fit within. Fitting is not an exact science. There are, you have to understand the player. You have to make a certain amount of assumptions about how much they're going to play. Are they improving? Are they developing their swing? And are we looking for the player to be challenged a little bit if they're progressing with their game, or are we trying to make it as easy as possible? Ultimately, there are probably 2 or 3 options that could actually work for that player, and then there are personal preferences that feed into that as well. So it's really a case of putting everything into the melting pot and saying, right, there are theories and principles that we're going to start from, but dynamically through testing, how is that affected by the club setup, and is that something which is a kind of a permanent improvement? Is something which is not just a kind of a sticking plaster fix, or is it actually something which tangibly can help someone improve their game and develop performance? So from here, I'm going to make a change to this setup just so we can see how that influences the shot data and give you an idea on the kind of things that we might change. So relating back a little bit into Tom's data here, we're really kind of utilising where his 6-iron sits at the lighter end. That's kind of the setup I've been testing here. And where for me, I've got that over rotation and a pull left. What we can do using the interchangeable system we have here, we can change just the one parameter. So this is really where what we're looking to do is to isolate a characteristic so that we know that it's the only thing that we're changing. So we've got a 115 gram shaft here. We've got another 115 gram shaft that I'm going to switch into, but it's the balance point which changes. So rather than changing 2 or 3 or 4 characteristics at one time, this is where there's an element of logic to the steps and the changes we're making. We're not just, say, scattergun changing loads of parameters at one time. In this one, we're going from a higher balance shaft that we had in, which mimics that setup of Tom's here on that 6-iron, to something where the balance is much more down the bottom end, which gives more to hit against and can change that linkage and leverage in the swing, dropping the club in a little bit more. So by changing the one parameter, we're isolating as saying, right, is this a good or a bad change? Which, when we then go to hit shots, we can see shown out in the data. So the hitting is really about validating those changes. So the way the club moves, and really you've got to think of it, it's levers. So there's the stiffness profiles and bend profiles of the shaft that affect a little bit the launch and the spin. But functionally, as a golfer, we're trying to move the club head around our body and frame with as much control and speed as possible. If we can do that and stay balanced, then strike becomes more consistent, shot patterns become more consistent. And it's that consistency which is the key thing. The better we get the clubs, the more repeating and the simpler timing and striking the ball becomes, the better our game can be. So by making this change, we've changed the weight proportion of the club to being much more down the bottom end. And with a miss left previously, the heavier tip end, as I start down, will drop the club in a little bit more and makes it harder for me to flip it left, in principle. But then when you hit with it, it creates a completely different pattern. So straight away, I've gone from a miss left to a miss right because I've really quite strongly changed the balance profile of the shaft. So good fitting is really a case of taking a principle of a change and one that we know we know what and why we're changing that parameter, and then validating it through testing and seeing a difference in the actual shot pattern. So in this instance, the ball's gone a little bit more to the right, path is still very square, but now the club face is a little bit open rather than shutting down. So the flight's higher, the spin's higher, the strike's better. Altogether, that is a progression in terms of performance. As we go through the fitting, we're then taking variations around that theme, dialing it up or down in order to dial the performance in for that player, and really being sympathetic to the player, understanding how much they're playing, where their game's coming from, what do they want to achieve. You can only do this by testing alternate options, say in hand, and seeing where is the difference, is it achieving what we want to, Most importantly, is it giving the player enough value to make a change? You might see 2 yards difference, and whilst technically it's better, is it worth the investment? There's got to be validation of that, and that is why it's so important to make those dynamic changes, see it in hand, feel the strike. Do you like the look of the club head? Do you like the sound of the club head? It's all so important. We play for enjoyment. The majority of us play for enjoyment rather than to earn money out there playing like the tour players. So actually, we're spending a few hours of our hard-earned time and quite a few of our hard-earned pounds and dollars on equipment to help us enjoy that as much as possible. So the better the clubs perform, the more confidence you have in that, which is also part of what doing this process gives you, a bit of understanding about why you're playing these clubs, what they're going to give you versus your current set or your previous set, but then understanding why you're playing them then can help you use them more consistently and better out in the course as well. But someone who can really give you reasons, logical reasons why that change is necessary and why it's improving it. Because then you can go out on course and know that you've made the right investment rather than just bought something and then gone out, played it, it hasn't really done anything for you, and you're left holding an expensive baby, which doesn't give you any more enjoyment, just feels rather annoying because you spent a lot of money and got nothing from it. So going through this sort of process, it gives you the chance to ask a load of questions. Any fitter is happy to answer questions because it gives you a chance to explain things. So ask as many questions as you can. If there's something you want to test, ask to test it, because it can be proved right or wrong, but it can help you, it can essentially scratch that itch and say, right, I like the idea of this, I know it doesn't work, or you know what, that worked really well, brilliant, I can have what I really want. But be demanding with a fitter. Ask them some of the questions, some of the details about why is a product working and why not. And tell them a bit about you and your game. The more we know about you, the better we can dial the clubs in to you. The more we know about where you play your golf, the kind of conditions you play in, the better we can make the clubs suit where you play on a regular basis. So it's very much a two-way street. It's not a fitter telling you why you have to play the certain option because I've decided in my weight of knowledge that this is the correct thing for you. It's a two-way process. You've got to be happy with what you're getting, and it's not just a dictatorial process. So go in there with an open mind, have ideas about what you'd like and what you think you'd like, but be open to maybe seeing some results that you might not expect, and you could come out with a brilliant product and a great understanding of what you've got and why. Hopefully they'll make you enjoy your game and your regular Sunday or Saturday 4-ball. Enjoy your time off and make the most of that well-earned rest and enjoyment on the golf course.